Dearest viewer, it is time for yet another Bridgerton episode recap. Today we're going to be reviewing Season 1, Episode 2, Shock and Delight. Our episode opens with quite a dramatic scene. Okay, we're not even using the color grading that we normally use with Bridgerton, so you know it's a flashback or something serious. Lady Danbury is rushing to a woman who is currently in labor. The woman is struggling to birth her child, but she eventually does birth the future Duke of Hastings, Simon Basset himself. We learn this is his mother, and she dies very soon after giving birth to him after losing too much blood. When Simon's father is called into the room, he cares very little that his wife has just passed away, but he's excited because he finally has a boy. Years later, we see the old Duke of Hastings, Simon's father, interacting with him while Simon is a young boy, and Simon has a speech impediment. This results in the old Duke of Hastings calling Simon an imbecile, and Lady Danbury swoops Simon into her care to ensure that her best friend's son is ensured the title and education and love that he should have been promised by his title. This opening sequence kind of spans a lot of time, so we skip several more years later. Simon seems to be over his speech impediment. He has been writing his father letters, and his stutter is almost gone, but it kind of flares up, and his father once again denounces him and casts him off. So we get a little bit of backstory here as to why Simon is back in town, because he has come to see his dying father, and not to see him, not to settle any scores, but simply to vow that he will never marry or birth another heir, and that the Hastings line will die with him. Now, let's get back to our present day timeline. Now that we've kind of got some background on Simon, our mysterious figure that wandered into Mayfair, Simon is currently training with his good friend Will Mondricht, who is a boxer. Anthony comes in and is like, hey man, best bro, stop messing around with my sister. Basically, like, that's my sister, because as you remember, in episode 1, they agreed to form an attachment and fool the Ton into believing that they are an item so that they can kind of get their respective benefits and get Lady Whistledown off their back. And Anthony reminds Simon, yo, I already promised her to Nigel Burbrook. Like, you're not going to make me a liar, are you, man? Simon says, yeah, that's cool and all, but like, I'm going to keep kind of courting your sister. There's a certain promenade that Daphne and Simon are on that may or may not have gotten me a little attention online, in which they're talking about how many dances they need to do and how many balls they're going to show up to, and if Simon needs to send her flowers. And this is where Simon delivers his iconic line of saying, if I was truly courting you, I would not need to send you flowers. I would simply need 5 minutes with you alone in a drawing room. Okay, all right.
In public on a promenade.
I'm stunned. Anyway, Violet is pretty happy about this. She's having the exact opposite reaction that Anthony is. Anthony's like, yo, bro, why are you going after my sister? Violet's like, Daphne's going to find a love match, which remember, Violet is her number one concern in life is that all of her children find a love match like she had with her late husband, Edmund. She's like so excited and is like telling Daphne, like, you think Duke's going to come by? You think he's going to send flowers? And Daphne's like, girl, you can leave the door open to other suitors. Like, we could just, it would be impolite not to talk to them. And Violet's like, something smells fishy here, but whatever, okay? She gets invited to have tea with the queen, which is a very high honor, so she's a little bit distracted from the fact that Daphne's acting kind of weird for somebody who seems to really like the Duke, right? She gets invited to go to tea with the queen, which is super exciting while they're getting ready for a ball, and then at the ball, Nigel approaches Anthony and is like, what is this going on here with Daphne and Simon? Like, you promised her to me. Do you not remember that? And Simon kind of overhears this and is like, yeah, you're not worthy of her. You're not worthy because I actually saw you trying to entrap Miss Bridgerton into marriage in the garden. And Anthony is furious because if there's one thing he loves more than his duty to his family, it is his actual family. And he is not going to stand for this hullabaloo with Mr. Nigel Burbrook. So he immediately says, you know what? Pulling my sister back, pulling that promise of engagement back. No longer, it is off. Good day to you, sir. And Simon's kind of like a little smug about it. So Anthony kind of tells Daphne that it's been dealt with, and Daphne's kind of like, I've kind of already dealt with it myself, but you know, now it's official. Like, she's back on the market, even though she's technically with the Duke. Are you following? So she was promised to Nigel, then she made a fake thing with the Duke. Anthony called up her and Nigel, and now she's single, but actually faking it with the Duke. Okay. So after the ball, Simon's like walking home and Nigel is following him because he is the freaking Peter Pettigrew of freaking Bridgerton world. And he's following Simon and he's basically like, you know, like, why would you not have proposed? Like, if you're actually so into her, if you're actually courting her and she's actually as into you as everybody says, why have you not proposed yet? Because like, I'm obviously off the table now. And he suggests that it's because her honor has already been ruined, i.e., she is no longer of the merry variety, okay? And Simon absolutely will not stand for a lady's honor being questioned. And he says to Nigel, you do not deserve to breathe the same air as her. And he beats him up. He absolutely just lays into Nigel and gives him a big, good old whooping the way he needed to. And honestly, thank you, Simon. Thank you, babe, for that. Thank you. Meanwhile, back at the Featheringtons, our favorite new money family, Penelope learns that Marina, who's kind of been tucked away and like not going to balls because she has a condition, it's nobody really specifying. She learns that this is not just some sickness, but she is pregnant. The only problem is Penelope and a lot of other women of this time period prior to being married don't really actually know what would get you pregnant. Like, this is kind of the first time they're being introduced to somebody who's pregnant outside of a marriage. So they really have no idea. And it leads to a very hilarious conversation with her and Eloise because they're kind of talking back and forth about like, how would this happen? And how does, like, what's going on? There's no birds and the bees talk in Regency 1800s London. Like, it does not exist. And so what's important to note here is that Penelope specifically says to Eloise that the reason she's curious about this topic is that one of her maids is pregnant. So she does not tell Eloise that Marina is pregnant, but she simply says that it was like some random maid. That's what the young girls are talking about. Unfortunately, Mr. Wormtail is back. Burbrook confronts the Bridgerton. He comes to them directly and says that he will ruin Daphne if she doesn't marry him because they were alone in the garden and he's like, basically, bring it on, babe. Like, whatever. Like, he wants to be with Daphne and is not going to be dissuaded by Anthony's yelling or Simon's fist. He wants to be with her. And Anthony immediately is like, duel. Because once again, if you've learned one thing from the last recap video or from Bridgerton at all, Anthony Bridgerton, my man, he is drama queen. And so he instantly goes to dueling and Daphne's like, not only is that illegal, remember that. It's dangerous. Remember that. And like, that's kind of like, we're being a little too absurd. So she basically is like, no, I will marry Nigel so that you don't freaking kill yourself or kill somebody else. Like, let's keep our family intact. I'll just marry him. Like, whatever. Like, let's get rid of the scandal once and for all. This has been such a mess. Unfortunately, we're not really having much delight. We're having a lot of shock in this episode thus far, and not good shock. Violet, of course, is worried about her daughter. She doesn't want her daughter to marry someone who she doesn't love, and especially someone who is kind of as questionable as Nigel Burbrook is. But it's time for her tea with the queen. So she dutifully goes to Her Majesty to have a little bit of a cuppa. The queen happens to mention to Violet that servants and maids can be terrible gossips. Like, they can spread rumor and quickly because they all work together. All the ladies' maids of the households and the chefs and the servants, they all talk. They all hang out. When all of our society people are at the balls, they're chit-chatting. They're getting the work done, okay? And that's totally fine. Everybody gossips at work. I think it's kind of wrong if you don't. Anyway, it's mentioned then when the Bridgerton housekeepers start to talk to Nigel Burbrook's housekeepers, while Nigel Burbrook is completely oblivious, that Nigel has a bastard son who he has shipped off to the country and that nobody knows about, which is hella scandalous and hella insinuates that Daphne doesn't need to marry this man. And so in the wake of this new information, Violet delivers one of her most iconic lines of the series. She has a lot of bangers, but this is one of the top ones, and it is, "We shall do what women do, talk." And they basically have all of them sort of mention like, oh, I heard this and my lady's maid mentioned this and da-da-da. And before you know it, the rumor ends up in Whistledown, which, as we know, Lady Whistledown can ruin you. And sure enough, this was already a ruining enough of a gossip that now that everyone in the town knows it and it's published in the society paper, Nigel is ruined and Daphne is free. Yeah, do the Barbie dance. It goes... having my Mike's Mike moment of the episode. And so she's finally free from the threat of marrying Nigel and she can continue to be the diamond of the season. So at the following ball, because as you know, we always gotta have a ball when some big updates happen, her and Simon dance together and she tells him, hey, I know this is a ruse and we have a purpose here, but like, I want to get married. This show does such a good job of like giving women agency in a time period where they very much did not, but also exploring how the standards of their time kind of defined them. And so in this conversation, Daphne's basically like, the man I marry is basically my equivalent in life. And like, I also want to be a mother and have a happy life. And therefore, like, this decision and this process is going to define the rest of my life. So basically, like, if you're not in it to pull the full ruse, like, you better back out. And then, you know, they end their dance and the ruse works and several suitors approach Daphne. But who do we see in the background? But Mr. Simon, and he looks a little jealous. What could that be? I don't know. You're just going to have to come back next week. I mean, the next episode, I probably won't be able to find out what happens next. So thank you guys so much for watching yet another one of these recaps. These are genuinely so fun for me to do. It allows me to rewatch the episodes with like a purpose of recapping them for you all, as well as get to just like, I don't know, have fun with how much I love this series. So thank you so much for watching. If you want to see the following episode plot summaries, please be sure to subscribe and hit the like button on this for good measure so I know that you're enjoying them. And I will see y'all in my very next video. Bye, y'all.